How did this thing flare up, and how do we get out of it?
Well, yeah. First of all, of course, I think pretty much everybody was surprised. You could argue we shouldn't have been by October 7th, but most people were. Certainly Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, whom I admire greatly, and who has some roots up in the New Hampshire and Boston regions, and is serving his country admirably. But still, if he could have one sentence back in anything that he's written or spoken in the last 3 years in the job, I'm pretty confident it would be his statement in Foreign Affairs magazine last October 2nd, that the Middle East is the most stable we've seen in decades. And it's the unfortunate it's the unfortunate nature of having a job in that position. If I wrote that, probably nobody would remember. But with the National Security Advisor saying it, it sort of proves that the country was surprised. And because you have to assume if anybody knew the state of intelligence and sort of the thinking of the president and the focus of the Secretary of State and Defense, it would be the National Security Advisor. And he obviously didn't see October 7th coming. On the other hand, I'll be a little more fair both to Jake and to the United States, and a little bit critical of Israel here. We have known for decades that the only way to have stability in the Levant and Israel for the Palestinian people as well is a two-state solution. We've been right about that. Netanyahu's been wrong. He's had no serious interest in pursuing a peace process. It's become increasingly clear over the years that when he seemed to be interested in that, it was more of a facade or a charade. And he assumed that he could sort of persuade Hamas, as it governed Gaza, to live and let live by giving it some economic incentives through a lot of, Palestinians working in Israel, crossing in each day, that kind of thing, that Hamas could be sort of weaned away from its emphasis on violence and the destruction of Israel. By the way, I have nothing good to say about Hamas. I'm being critical of Netanyahu in policy terms. I'm very critical of Hamas in also ethical terms. And what it did on October 7th was horrible. But nonetheless, Prime Minister Netanyahu's disinterest in a serious peace process allowed this sort of cooking pressure cooker to just boil from within. To our discredit, we didn't understand just how bad that sort of pent-up pressure was. But at least we knew that in policy terms, the right approach was to try to give the Palestinian people their own voice in their own country. And Israeli politics have not delivered, have not been serious on that front. So in that regard, we were surprised tactically. But strategically, I think we, the United States, Republicans and Democrats, for many administrations in a row, have wanted a two-state solution precisely because it could reduce the risks of something like what happened on October 7th and the aftermath.
Do you think and we've only got about a minute left, but I mean, the current peace proposal, do you think that that's kind of just a way station, or is it perhaps the beginning of the end game?
It's the beginning of the end game because Israel can't completely destroy Hamas, no matter how often they say that. Even, they do have to weaken it. They have weakened it. We used to say we had to destroy al-Qaeda, and we realized you really couldn't, but you needed to make it operationally ineffective. And that's going to have to be somewhere down the line where the Israeli government winds up. But the end game in terms of this phase of the fighting, therefore, to me, is somewhat similar to what the Biden or Israel ceasefire proposal looks like today. But the longer term stability of Israel and, I hope, a Palestinian state has not yet been sketched out in a way that people are in agreement about. And that's going to require, if anybody wants to win a Nobel Peace Prize, tackle that problem and see if you can solve it, because that's the one that's clamoring for longer term attention.
Michael, there's your next book.
That's
I don't know about that.
Absolutely.